Having met Sharon and her son Edward, you saw in that report, I know that for the parents who have these cruel, devastating, often fatal conditions, that they would see this as a dream come true, to be able to have a healthy child and stop this disease once and for all being passed down the generations, but expect a vigorous debate before this is ever allowed to be used to help couples conceive.
All right, Fergus, thank you very much.
Right, so, I hope that really explained in that 4-minute clip, one, that we do think this is a breakthrough in mitochondrial research, and so do other people, and also that how important it is that this sort of research goes ahead. And two of the people that are actually in that video working in the lab who did some of this research are actually in the audience here tonight, just highlighting the kind of commitment they have to try and help us really try and get rid of some of these mitochondrial diseases, because if we can do this sort of technique of transferring, then we will be able to take, as the head of the muscular dystrophy campaign said, take this disease out at the knees. And I think that's one of the things that we want to do. So what do we do now? Well, if you think about this, what we're proposing is basically a couple has IVF, we do this manipulation, and we would be able to stop the transmission of certain mitochondrial diseases. You might then ask, well, why can't we do this now? Well, we can't do it now because we're not sure of the safety. We don't know what risks we'd be giving people by doing this. And I think that's a very important thing that we need to test. We need to look at how safe this is. And these are studies that are going on in the laboratory at the moment. We need to be able to say whether or not the child that's born is likely to have mitochondrial disease, but also doesn't develop other diseases just due to the technique. The other thing that we will need to do when we've done that is we will need to change the law. And at the moment, we're allowed very much to do this research. We're allowed to continue with research, and I'm just going to stress a little bit more about that. But at the present moment, even if we showed this was as safe as IVF, we wouldn't be allowed to do it. Because the law says if we manipulate human eggs or early embryos, then we cannot implant those back into a woman. It's something that I hope will be looked at very favourably, but one of the things that we will need to do is we might need to call upon help from individuals like yourselves to try and help change the law if you agree this is a good thing to do. And I think one of the things that we need to do is we need to make people aware of why this sort of research is important. So is there anything else that you can do? Well, one of the reasons we've been able to do this research in the first place is because women have donated eggs for research. And that sounds like an unbelievably kind thing to do, and it is. I think one of the things that we're very keen on to take this work forward, and much of the work that we've done in the past, which were really done with eggs, which were donated during the IVF procedure, but were abnormal eggs, what we're looking for is now donations of normal eggs. And that's certainly something, if anybody feels that they would be prepared to donate normal eggs or donate eggs for research, then please do have a talk to me. I know it's a big thing, but really this sort of research can't move forward unless we can determine whether or not this is safe. And it's not about being safe in a mouse model or something else. It's got to be safe in humans before it will ever be allowed. But am I optimistic, using Dr. McFarlane's phrase? Am I optimistic about the future? Well, I think I am optimistic about the future. I do believe the work that we're doing in Newcastle and other groups around the world are doing are actually trying to fundamentally change the course of mitochondrial disease. And I appreciate for many of you, you're going to be saying, well, look, that's too late for me. And of course it is too late for you. But there are other advances where we're looking at new treatments or new ways to alter these genes, for example, which may be of benefit to you. And that's why, whilst I'm not so sure that we're going to beat Germany 4-0, I'm pretty sure that in 4 years' time there will be significant advances in the way in which we treat patients with mitochondrial diseases. Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks very much, Doug. I think the first thing to say is that he may be on the telly, but I wouldn't let him have the remote.
Thank you very much. I should also say I'm very grateful for Mrs. Sharon Bernardi and Edward for making a huge contribution to this. A great kind of personal, I suppose, personal cost. I mean, and it just shows how people are prepared to help and how much it does help. And I mean, Ms. Bernardi's message is a very clear message, and getting those clear messages over to a public that doesn't know anything about mitochondrial disease and probably didn't know anything about mitochondria before the 6 o'clock news and the 10 o'clock news, I think is a really important thing. The other thing is, just to assure you, I'm not quite so clumsy if I'm not quite so nervous.
He's not doing the egg manipulation, don't worry.
Yes.
Doug, what I would like to ask you to do there is, you talked about a variety of techniques, antenatal testing, PGD, and this new pronuclear transfer technique. Could you just put that in perspective in terms of the number of women that might apply to?
Well, I think one of the things that we are very keen is to kind of offer this to anybody. I mean, clearly the techniques of every couple that's got mitochondrial disease, or indeed if you've got a relative with mitochondrial disease, should get specialised counselling. I think that's a very important thing because we can discuss risks. For many people, there is a possibility of these techniques to test the baby. And again, that's very much dependent upon us knowing where the spelling mistake or genetic defect is. But if we do, then that we can offer that. The techniques that we've been talking about preventing the transmission of mitochondrial disease, is for a specific group of patients. And we reckon that there's probably somewhere between 1,000 and 3,000 women in the country that would benefit from that technique. Now, whether or not it's appropriate, whether or not they'd like to go forward for it, will very much depend on the safety. I mean, we know that as we get older, as women get older, there's a greater risk of having children with Down syndrome, but that's a risk many people are prepared to take. But if I could say to you, for example, that we could prevent your children getting a disease and there's a 5% risk, is that something you'd take? Well, it might well be if there's a 100% risk of the child being affected. So it would very much depend upon personal choice.
There may be some women in the audience just now who think, well, that technique may be applicable to me, the pronuclear transfer. How long are we looking at in terms of it being available? I realise there are barriers to it becoming available, particularly legislation. But have you any idea how likely it will be that this is available, for instance, within the next 5 years?
Okay, I think we have to do some crucial safety checks, and that's what we've been approved to do. So rather, as Catherine Feeney was saying about how clinical research is regulated, the research on embryos is also highly regulated. And we now have approval to do that, so we're now starting to look for normal volunteers.